Welcome to part 2 of our Building a B2B Marketing Strategy series. Today we're going to be talking about UX design and a little bit of development for B2B websites. And to help me do so, I brought in my friend David Martin, who is a UX and UI specialist, to help us review the Coding is for Losers site and also just go over some B2B best practices for when building a website. Stay tuned. We're back in our handy strategy file, and as I said, this video we're going to be talking about website design, UX, UI, messaging, conversion flow, and then touching briefly on website development. So David, you're the expert here when it comes to UX and design. Why don't you start us off by telling us some things that B2B websites should be mindful of in regards to structure, content, etc.
I mean, there are things that every website needs to have: clear value proposition, unique selling points, social proof. Then there's stuff that, you really need to have in there if you're like a B2B client, which is more specifically like a page with your capabilities. So think like if you're an agency, you need like services page that has all of your services and then dives into specific details about your process. You also need to have results. So success stories, case studies, anything that you can tie into that service or product that you're offering. So that it justifies, going and actually contacting you. Then there's just nice to haves, which is, to make it easier for people to convert. Things like a high value lead magnet or, premium content that you can gate, like webinars or, different types of tools like checklists that you can kind of give out to start that relationship. And then obviously, if you're giving out a lead magnet or anything like that, you're going to need to have some sort of nurture sequence to run users through. You definitely want to try to make it as easy as possible for people to go and contact you while they're browsing on your website. So things like having a pop-up lead form that's kind of accessible anywhere is something that I always recommend.
So to David's point, there's a few things that we wanted to look for when starting to rebuild the website. So I'm going to jump over here to Figma. This is what we're using for web design. So what I've done also is I dropped in some old screens of the original website. I then got the staging site that we're working on now, and then the final and new updated designs over in this other Figma file. So I'll be running through all these in context of what David just said. So he said a couple things that I think are important. I'm going to open up some text so I can type. So there were a couple types of pages that David talked about. He talked about service pages. He talked about case studies or testimonials or some sort of social proof pages. He talked about some sort of conversion page, so where somebody goes from being traffic into actually becoming a lead. Usually they have to submit a form on the website, and there were two parts of that. He was talking about macro conversions, which is what I just talked about, aka when traffic becomes a lead, and then also micro conversions. So you heard him talking about like ebooks, checklists, giveaways, things like that. And he also talked about unique value propositions or unique selling propositions. These are critical for lead generation B2B websites. So these are really four big pieces of what David talked about that all B2B websites need. Now what I want to do is actually dive into the Coding is for Losers site and show you how we put these things into action. This is the homepage, what Coding is for Losers looked like when David and I first teamed up. Now, when we first teamed up, David was publishing a lot of content. He was basically using this website as a blog, and he was using that as top funnel traffic to funnel people into his training courses. David is incredibly adept with things like SQL, Python, a lot of automation-based languages, building tools in Google Sheets, building little mini stacks that technical marketers can use and implement. And people were coming to the website because David had such great knowledge and in-depth information on these things that, again, they'd be searching for things like how to use SQL in Google Sheets. David would rank for that, and then he would upsell them with a training course on SQL, Sheets, automation languages, etc. When we partnered up, I saw the potential and the value in what David could offer to companies in terms of services, and then also the software that David had been building, which was basically a connector piece for Google BigQuery. I knew that the website had to change pretty significantly in order for us to be able to sell that as a service. So again, looking at the homepage here, he basically had all of the different categories on the website listed here. You could then click and deep link into them. So he had a lot of content on Google Sheets tutorials, data analysis recipes. These are basically things that he was building in Google BigQuery, Google Sheets, basically custom reports. Think about like an SEO content audit or like a funnel analysis, various analyses that he was building custom that he was then publishing on the website as well in terms of look at how I was doing this. Then he also had a ton of content on analytics tools and reviews and tutorials, case studies from his current students, a list of his courses, and then some more video tutorials as well that he was just posting on YouTube, which were essentially the same as the tutorials up here and the tutorials here. So when we look at these different categories here on the top level navigation, and we think about this in terms of a B2B website, and again, going back to what David was speaking about what a B2B website needs in order to be effective, what you don't see here are services pages, right? That's number one. There's no services pages here. The other thing that he's missing is some sort of major conversion. I'll just draw a $ for that. There's nothing on here that's going to drive people to become a lead. He does have the case studies. He does have quite a bit of content here. These are all content. And he does have the conversion point here in terms of courses. And then he's got the about page down here. So the first thing that I needed to do was, again, try and restructure the website and reformat it to have services pages, to have more in-depth case studies that are speaking more towards our services and less about the outputs of his students in the course, and then also going through and really combining all this content. When you look at these are all content here. So each one of these is basically a blog category pages that's listing out different pieces of content that David was publishing. I knew that we had to combine a lot of these in order to improve the flow of the website. Again, because when we're just looking at it, content, about page, I'll call this a sales page and I'll call this a sales page. That's basically only 2 out of the 7 pages are actually talking about the services. We need a lot more than that, right? We don't necessarily, while content is important, we don't necessarily want to path people to the content first. We want to use content for supporting and then also top funnel attraction. But when somebody's on the website, we want to path them to the money pages, meaning services, this is what we do, case studies, this is what we've done, and then let's figure out how we can do this for you, some sort of contact or conversion page. And then also along the way, a micro conversion page as well. So again, looking at what David had here, these are content pages here. We can combine all of these into one single blog, if you will, and then use the categories underneath that for, personal letters from David, sheets, tutorials, tools, and then recipes, right? Those can essentially become categories on one single blog page. So just right off there, we've now combined this into one page, and then we've got case studies, we've got courses down here, we've got the about page up here, and then we can also put in services up here, right? So just off rip, I knew that I had to go through and build out services pages to speak to what we were ultimately trying to sell. So now if we jump over to what we've actually designed over here, I'll show you how this looks in practice. So what we've done is we've designed these pages here to essentially be our service pages. Now, originally, David and I thought that we were going to go after 3 different services. We were going to offer to build custom Google Sheets for people. We were going to offer to build custom data analysis recipes, which are similar to Google Sheets, but basically running through BigQuery. So those are 2 very similar options right there. And then the third one would be to build data pipelines. Now, so we actually built a version of the website that's live right now. It'll be gone by the time you guys watch this video. But basically, that website has those 3 different services laid out. I can actually show you if you want. So as you can see, we've got these 3 different service pages basically lined up. Now, this website has been live for months, and what we found is that, again, our messaging is not dialed in to the point of where we need it to be. So you can see here from the previous version of the website, we've addressed the fact that we're talking about we are an automation partner in crime. We are a service-based business. You can contact us. We have services. We have case studies, etc. And then I designed these 2 different types of content formats up here, which we'll talk about later. But what we don't have is really that clear UVP. When you talk about wanting to automate your business, it's just way too broad, right? Who are we speaking to? We could be speaking to anybody. It's not refined enough, and we weren't generating much leads off this website, aside from people that already know who we were, and just kind of converting them via sales process as opposed to the marketing and communication process. So what we decided to do was really look hard at these 3 service offerings, because really these are all kind of branching from the same service, but what we're having to do is explain it in 3 different ways, which is actually more confusing. What we thought we were creating more service offerings to generate more revenue, but realistically we were just kind of confusing people, when at the end of the day, when we look at the 3 different service lines, the one that makes us the most money is the data pipeline. So what we decided to do is focus the entire website around this concept of the data pipeline, because realistically both of these, both Sheets and these recipes, are outputs of the data pipeline. So the data pipeline, what it does, it grabs all your company's data, all your clients' data, puts it in one database. And then what we do is we push off basically into Data Studio, into Sheets, into Looker, into Tableau, different pieces of analysis. So it could be like a monthly report, it could be a content audit, it could be, again, that funnel analysis. What we were trying to do is sell those analysis, those recipes one-on-one, when we realized we're actually going to make a lot more money off the data pipeline, and this is actually a lot more valuable to our customers because then we're customizing those recipes off the back of it too. So now when we look at the homepage for what's going to be the new website, it's all about data pipelines. So everything on here is speaking to the fact that our one service is data pipelines, and then we've segmented off the back of that. These sub-services are speaking specifically to different parts of the data pipeline market. So we build data pipelines for agencies, e-commerce, and SaaS companies. These now are becoming the service pages. So they're all data pipelines, but we're targeting them towards agencies, e-com, and SaaS companies. And again, that allows us to then tailor the output of those. If we're speaking to an agency, we're selling much more on the proposition of aggregate all your data in one place and cut down on all that back and forth between having to access all your clients' data. When it comes to e-com, we're talking about building analyses that nobody else can do because we're combining data from all these different places. When it comes to SaaS, we have very specific dashboards that are talking to things like customer churn, onboarding issues, things like that, that again, because of the access to the database, they're just not possible anywhere else. So again, what we're selling ultimately is that process of aggregating all the content and all the data into a database and then pushing it out into the reporting styles that you choose. So again, as opposed to saying, hey, we do Sheets tools, we can build you a custom recipe, we were having to explain the concept of Sheets tools, we were having to explain the concept of recipes, as opposed to just saying this. We build you a pipeline in BigQuery, and then we report and visualize however you want. You tell us. So going back and looking at the messaging, we added this process stuff that David spoke about, where it shows a very clear 1, 2, 3, 4 of this is what it is, and this is what we do, this is what you can expect. Really, again, just helping to educate that person. So we're taking the onus off our sales team. Again, this is really important because now people we're hoping are going to come to us having consumed this information a lot more contextualized and ready to talk about an actual data pipeline, as opposed to having us sell them on the concept of a data pipeline on the call, right? Because imagine we were having sales calls and we were trying to feel them out on the sales call to be like, should we build them a sheet? Should we pitch them a recipe? Should we pitch them a pipeline? We're cutting back on that now. If you get on a sales call with us, you know that you're getting pitched a pipeline. It makes it so much easier to have that conversation, to just talk about the pipeline again, which is much more revenue for us and just a much better fit for that client. We know that. Then it comes down here to talk about recipes, right? So I'm combining the concept of recipes into the data pipeline. Recipes is like our word, right? That's kind of like the branded search term that we're trying to build is BigQuery recipes. So again, we're publishing these recipes here. And these are clickable, and you can go to a landing page where most of them are going to be free. A lot of them will actually be paid, so you can actually pay through the website or we'll set that up for you. But point being is that we're giving away a lot of these free. So remember on David's previous website, he was talking about Google Sheets tools. He had all these tools built. We're aggregating those into everything. So now everything is being called a recipe on our website. So all the tools, all the trainings, anything that was like in Sheets or Data Studio or BigQuery, we're turning that into a recipe. That recipe has a landing page, which I can show you right now. So these are the recipes on the staging domain. And again, what they are is they're just servicing different pieces. So now we're asking for, on the free ones, we're asking for an email address here. So when Dave was talking about those micro conversions, this is what we're using as a micro conversion. We're asking for someone's email in exchange to get access to one of our recipes. So again, we're talking about the simplicity and the cohesiveness and helping them understand the data pipeline and the output of recipes, as opposed to publishing these things as one-off and calling them Sheets templates or calling them Data Studio templates. We're calling them all recipes now. So if you want a monthly report, that's a recipe. If you want a technical SEO audit, we have a recipe for that. If you want to look at your AdWords data and Facebook data and analytics data all in one, that's a recipe. And then we're just titling those things and publishing them on the site, connected to Podia, so we can capture their email and then much more easily turn them from somebody on the website to an email address, then pushing for a sales consultation off the back of that. So again, as opposed to them coming to the website looking for help on SQL and then finding a template about that and then opting in, that has nothing to do with data pipelines. Where again, we're shifting all the content to focus around this concept of data pipelines and recipes. So now all of our content, again, is going to be focused on building more and more of these recipes to give away for free or to give away and sell, which then ultimately allows us to broach that conversation about building an entire data pipeline for them, which again is where a large majority of the revenue is going to be for us. After that, I love to put in stuff on cost. It's really tough on B2B websites to put in information on cost, but it's just a really good pre-qualification step that we don't want to get on the phone with people who don't understand that you're going to have to invest at least $5,000 in order for us to build this pipeline for you. And then we've got this standard call to action, the bottom of the pages that are all gearing now towards ready to build your pipeline. So again, if we look at the current version of the website that we have, which is the interim, we've got these call to actions that are ready to automate your business. But again, we've hyper focused that on ready to build your pipeline. So all the call to actions now are focused on ready to build your pipeline and then having a consultation around that. So now we have, this is actually gonna be the home page for now, but this is also gonna be the service page template, and we're just gonna repopulate this with digital agency, e-commerce, SaaS. So again, the service pages are now done. The micro conversions, these are the recipes. And then we also built this new page for case studies where we're highlighting customer success off of our services, not just the training, right? So again, so we're creating specific customer stories that speak to our entire process. So this one was about creating universal e-commerce reports. Again, we have a pipeline specifically for e-commerce agencies. So now our case studies and stories are all highlighting the data pipeline, not the Sheets template. And that's a very easy switch because again, if you hired us to do a Sheets template, we were probably gonna try and pitch you on a pipeline anyways. So again, the entire focus of the website now, everything from the positioning to the messaging to the micro conversions to the macro conversions to the service pages to the case studies are all speaking to this concept of pipelines. This is what we're calling the Get Started page. This is the equivalent of a contact page, that some people call it. I asked David how he felt about designing, what type of forms to put on a Get Started or a contact page to maximize conversions, and this is what he said.
For B2B clients, I think that it's okay to ask qualifying questions. So I don't think it's appropriate to just have name, email, phone number, and we'll get back to you. I think it's like you want to ask questions that show that you're trying to qualify that lead before it's coming in. So I like to ask, what is your budget like? What are your goals? Which of these services that are available on our website are you interested in discussing? If you're selling B2B services that are website related, ask for a URL for you to be able to go and actually review it prior. I think it's okay to add qualifying questions. I just don't think you want to overwhelm the user with things to fill out either. I've done multi-step forms for a recent agency website that I designed for Pareto PPC. We have a multi-step form that's just like, hey, give us your name, your email, and your phone number. And then on the next step, we'll ask qualifying questions. If we don't get the qualifying questions at that point, ideally we'd be able to follow up with like an abandoned cart sequence and be like, hey, can you fill out some of these questions so that we can, book a call with you. But that being said, it really depends on how it's built. What you don't want to do is have, a 3-5 step form that's asking for a bunch of questions that you don't need to actually qualify the leader or start the conversation. But you do want to have enough so that you can sort the garbage from, the gold, essentially.
So we actually chose to go with a multi-step form here. This video here specifically speaks to, again, the data pipelines and what to expect from the call, the requirements that we have. Very short 3-minute video of David talking. Then this is a single form here that we just capture their name and email. After they hit this form, they get redirected to a page that has a Calendly embed on it. They then select the time that they want to talk with David, and then there's a questionnaire in there that again pre-qualifies them. So there's about 10 questions in there. Again, we're really adamant about the fact that we want people to be fully educated on what pipelines are. So we're not spending our sales calls educating people on this and trying to sell them on the concept of pipelines. We want them to come ready to understand and discuss what a pipeline can do for their business. So that way we can focus the sales calls on showing them examples. We can talk about the benefits. We can talk about how we can customize it. Again, not talking about what BigQuery is and what a data pipeline is. We want them to really go through and understand. They have to show up to the sales call ready to talk about that and understanding. So actually a lot of the questions on the forum discuss that and ask them, different questions about what they're currently doing, what's their familiarity with BigQuery. And again, if we feel like they're not ready, then we'll actually send them a manual email that says, hey, make sure you watch this video before you come, et cetera, et cetera. So after they book a time there, they then get redirected to a thank you page. So this thank you page here, again, has another video of David talking. He's telling them what to expect. He's telling them to show up because we're going to talk via a Zoom call. So make sure your camera's on, make sure you're in a quiet place, make sure you're inside. We don't want to talk to you if you're in the car. Make sure you block off 30 minutes, the whole thing. We really want people to show up prepared. And then we also have just links to follow us on social media or to check out our training platform. And again, once somebody hits this thank you page, this is what fires the conversion analytics and in Facebook. So this is what we're calling a qualified marketing lead for them to go through the entire questionnaire process. So something else that David and I spoke about was the different types of pages and how they should be built, whether that's an informational page or a service page or a contact page. And this is what David told me.
It's based on intent. So you have to look at the intent behind that piece of content. The intent for a white paper is slightly different than the intent of a blog post, right? That's why you have the ability to gate things like white papers, as opposed to nobody's going to give you their email to read your blog post. You know what I mean? So I think the big differentiation that I like to make is between a small value and big value, with a gate right in between, right? So you can offer small value, right? This is Gary Vaynerchuk's jab, 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 right? There's a gate, and then there's big value on the other side. That's your right hook. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to make that differentiation. It doesn't really matter what form it takes, as long as you're matching it to intent. So a webinar on something that is a specific problem for your client, that you know is a specific problem for your client, that you could use to qualify. So for example, I might have a webinar that says, here's 6 things that you need to do to optimize your agency website for conversions. And anybody that opts into that, I know is a very, very warm lead, because they have an agency and they're worried about conversions on their agency site, right? So again, it's big value for them, but it's also a way for me to qualify them, as opposed to somebody who's reading that same piece of content that's not a webinar, that's just extrapolated into a blog post. They may or may not be a qualified lead, right? Because
Right.
maybe they're doing research for an agency client of theirs, right? And they're just looking at this content. So again, it's that small and big value, and you need to very much look at what the intent is based on where they're coming from and how they're consuming the content.
Now, I have my own thoughts on this as well, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this in the content video, which I'm going to do next for you guys. But in regards to how to design for content, I think it's really important that, to David's first point, that you do understand intent. If the traffic is going to a blog page, it's much more informational, right? So the goal of a blog page is to get somebody to consume the content, not necessarily to take any other action than that. That's always my first goal. So what I like to do when designing these pages and just understanding how people flow. So let me go back to his original page here. So this is what his pages look like beforehand. And what you see here is what's called a full width page, meaning it goes all the way across. Now the problem with that is we're living in, obviously through the boom of mobile devices. A lot of people are used to reading on mobile screens, which is a lot skinnier, right? And text is a lot shorter. So people are a lot more used to reading much shorter sentences that are chunked up better. And then also, again, they're reading top to bottom, not side to side. So whenever we're designing pages that are meant for consumption, meaning we want people to read the content, we always want to minimize the body text to 800 pixels across. What that allows us to do is have much more digestible content that people are actually going to path down and read. So when it comes to designing a blog page, always keep it at 800 minimum, and then also just make sure that your subheadings and whatnot, you have the proper sizing on those as well. Again, you can just kind of look at our blog to see how we do it. You'll notice on all of our blogs that we use that thinner design, and then we also open that up for images so you can get full images on there, because again, when it comes to B2B stuff and the content you're going to be creating, a lot of it's going to be informational, educational, and you don't want small little blurry screenshots that they can't see. You want big screens. So I'll talk about that again a little bit more when we talk about content in the coming videos. So everything that we've been talking to so far is UX. UX stands for user experience. So UX is a lot less about the actual colors and fonts, and it's a lot more about form and function and how a website performs. But when it comes to how a website looks, UI or user interface, I'm not a designer, so I asked David for how he picks UI for B2B websites.
So I follow the same exact process when it comes to researching UI for B2C clients as I do for B2B clients. The first is I like to run a competitive UX analysis. So we'd go into 3 to 5 competitors and we'd list pros and cons of their user experience and of their user interfaces. Then we'd go into the actual website that we're working on and we'd do the same thing. We'd be able to see, what are the shortcomings and what are the opportunities that we have. From there, I like to apply the best dress rule. So when you go to a party, you don't ever want to be underdressed. If anything, you want to be better dressed by one level, right? So if everybody's wearing like what I'm wearing, maybe you want to wear a dress shirt, right? And that way you're going to stand out a little bit more. You're going to be remembered as the one who was better dressed by one. So I very much like to apply the very same principle when I design UIs, where I say, all right, well, here are our biggest competitors. How can we, instead of wearing dress shirts the way that they're wearing dress shirts, how could we make it so that customers feel like we're a little bit more professional, we're a little bit more buttoned up, we're coming in a suit and tie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, you have to strike a balance between the brand values, which is very, very important. You have to understand what is the customer that you're trying to attract, and you very much want to dress up in a way that is going to speak to them. But at the same time, you want to take a look at what your competitors are doing, and you want to make sure that you're at the same level or just one level above that.
And in regards to our UI, honestly, I just hired a designer, and he came up with kind of the fonts and the color schemes and whatnot. Really, what I do in here is I just do the layouts. I'll tell him that I want text here, I want this here, I want, and I'll basically just have to write out these pages ahead of time. And a lot of times, if you're familiar with using Figma, I think it's a great platform to learn. I mean, you can basically just drag and drop in here. It's literally kind of like a visual page builder, if you will, and then you just have a developer go in and build it. So speaking of a developer going in and building it, when it comes to B2B websites, there are some things and recommendations that we have in regards to development and how you should build it. David is also a full stack developer. He's a really talented guy. So I asked him his opinion on how a website should be built in regards to the dev, and this is what he said.
I have two types of recommendations, and they're based on what kind of teams you have to manage it. If you're a startup, let's say you're a SaaS company and it's you and your founder, and you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of resources, and you don't know how to program, you don't have money to pay programmers, then I would say go with something like Webflow. That's a visual builder. You'll be able to validate your MVP. And when you're ready to scale to something that's a little bit more robust, a little bit more customizable, you'll be able to do it because you have resources, right? But there's no sense in spending a lot of resources on a website or a platform that you can't very easily customize quickly, right? Because if you're listening to your customers and you're listening to their objections, that means that you're going to have to be going into your website week after week and updating it to make sure that the website, again, as an extension of your sales team, is acting as such. But if you know how to code, you're comfortable working with developers, or you have your own development resources or funding, then I would probably go for something like WordPress that comes a little bit more out of the box. How can I say? Out of the box, it's harder to use, but in the long term, you're going to be able to do a lot more with your marketing. You're going to be able to have, advanced tracking. You're going to be able to have plugins that optimize your website's performance, right? You're going to be able to have a lot of accessibility features right out of the box added to your WordPress website that you're going to have to figure out manually on another platform. And you're going to be able to customize a lot of things so that you're showing users content only when it's appropriate. And what I mean by that is you don't want to just show them a contact form on every single page. It's not appropriate. You want to show them a contact form on a service page, but if they're on a blog post, you want to show them a call to action that's a little bit more informational or entertaining, right? So that you can get them on your list and then work on that whole nurturing sequence so that you can get them to the point where they're wanting to contact you for your service.
That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In the next video, we're going to be talking about content strategy. Very important for B2B. If you're doing it right, it should make up for about 80% of your traffic. David was nice enough to put together a checklist for you. Just make sure you hit the link below. It'll take you to my website. We have it up there for free. As always, like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.